Welcome to Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Clausen, your source for insights into the world of substance misuse prevention. Each episode, Dave brings you the latest strategies, expert discussions, and real-life success stories designed to empower your work and inspire impactful change. Whether you're a prevention professional, community advocate, or simply passionate about making a difference, this podcast will keep you informed and motivated. Get ready to lead with a confidence that drives lasting results. Let's lead the change together.
All right, folks, we're back for another episode of the Prevention Leaders Podcast, and I'm joined by my friend Angie. She's back for another conversation. Welcome.
Hello.
So it's been a minute. I'm trying to remember when you were last on the podcast, but it's been a minute, hasn't it?
Probably a job or two ago.
Yeah, I think long overdue. So will you give our audience a little rundown on your background, who you are and what you do?
So Angie Asa Lovstad, and I come to the audience with over 25 years of prevention experience, having run a local coalition in our county with 15,000 people. I always like to joke that we're a 5-stoplight town, and in some rural communities that's really large, but it's still very rural. And then I also ran a statewide coalition called Alliance of Coalitions for Change, AC4C. And through all that, I learned the skills of facilitation, and that's kind of been my work ever since. Kind of fell into that and found it was the secret sauce for doing community level change. And so I broke off onto my own and am running a company called Asa Facilitation, which I get to partner with some great folks, kind of like the Mr. Dave Clausen.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know you and I, before we hit record, we're chatting about the world as it is today, and especially in prevention, behavioral health. There's so much change happening, so much uncertainty about the future, funding, workforce, burnout. And I'm hoping we could dig into that, because I know within your 25, 30 years of experience, you've navigated some change at both the local coalition, the statewide coalition, your work through Asa Facilitation. So what are your thoughts about just jumping into that topic?
Sure. I think it's very needed right now. You know, you can't be in the world of grant business without having change facing you, because every 4 or 5 years you're writing another grant. And I used to joke with folks, you know, what are you going to do when you're done with this? I'm like, well, I'm just looking for another grant. So for a long time, I've always been just looking for another grant. And essentially, it's kind of how I'm still in the grant world, because a lot of the work I do gets paid from grants. I would like to say that it's the same as it's always been. We're going to go through a cycle where the funding will change, but it feels different right now. And I think it's going to take a lot of community engagement to get us through where we're at right now. But oftentimes we do the same formula of how to approach the work, and that's not necessarily going to work. And so I've discovered a change formula that I've kind of leaned into to help understand why we get stuck once in a while. And when I've presented that to different folks, it just makes sense. And it's like it kind of gives them idea where they need to focus their energies. So, you know, we cannot continue working as our individual silos anymore. We need to really come together and approach the things that need to change in our community as a collective front, because the money is just not going to be like it used to be.
And there's a quote that I've heard you share a time or two. The quote that I've heard you share is, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change.
Yeah, that comes from the fellow that kind of adopted the change formula. And I think, you know, we are holding on to what was and how we did work before. And it's going to shift. And so I think the people that are coming into prevention right now probably have an advantage because they don't know what was. And we're not going to have the same funding streams. We're not going to have the same way of working. We're going to be more scrutinized on our evidence-based strategies than ever before. There's going to be more monitoring, perhaps. There's going to be different agencies that we're going to be reporting to. And so that's going to be hard. And it's when you can let go of what was that you can open up to the change that's going to happen. And part of what I really like about how that fits into the change formula, the very first thing of the change formula is dissatisfaction with the status quo. And I was just working with some folks that are really diving into data. I'm like, you are the key essential piece to having people overcome the resistance to change. If you can tell the story of data and why we have to do something and show what it's painting as a picture of what really needs to happen in our community, and is it okay that we still have, 20, 30% of our kids reporting that they use alcohol on a regular basis? Are you thinking that's okay? Well, most chances are as a parent, you're not going to say, well, that's cool that, a third of the class is actually using alcohol. As simple as it gets. So be able to paint the story and change the fact that I'm okay with this. Got to have the satisfaction status quo.
So essentially helping them sort of understand that the current situation just isn't working anymore. And sometimes that's us as prevention leaders helping communicate that to the community members, the coalition members, the stakeholders. But sometimes that dissatisfaction comes externally as well, that there's just this dissatisfaction of things ain't working, so we got to do things different. Is that a fair interpretation?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can't figure that out, I think that's where coaching comes in too, right? When we do our coaching, it's like, are you okay with the way things are? And if they're not, let's figure out where do we go from here? And that's where the second part of this formula comes, which is create that vision.
I'm going into my MI here and I'm thinking, highlighting the ambivalence or the discrepancies. Well, you said this, but you also said this. And yeah. Okay. Sorry. The vision.
Yeah. So yeah, now that you say that, oh, that's probably not good. But what do I do? So figuring out, what does it look like around the corner? What are we shooting for? And if people don't have that idea of where they're headed, don't have that point on the map where they're going, it's really hard to make a change, hard to get out of bed, hard to, go to that next community event. So really creating that vision that we're headed in this direction is where we want to go. So facilitating those kind of conversations that help people, really dream big and put it out there what's possible. Because if we don't, I feel that's where hope lives, is in the vision, right? We can make this better place.
What about the naysayers that, well, that's not really, you aren't going to stop drinking like that?
Well, that's where we have not yet gotten into where there's dissatisfaction. So your naysayers are stuck in that dissatisfaction status quo. They're okay. So as long as a zero is there, we're not going to overcome the resistance to change. So any one of these elements, if there's zero, it's going to stay zero. Your resistance to change.
Yeah. So you're already showing how, based upon the responses, what you're getting from your coalition, your stakeholders, bringing that back to the formula. Okay. Well, what comes after vision?
So yeah, once you have that vision, a lot of people will be stuck with, well, I don't even know where to begin. So then the third part of the formula is the first steps. And so collectively creating those first steps so that everyone has their voice and has, hey, I know where I belong. I can take this piece. I can move forward. But if people don't know where to start, they're never going to, it's too big. It's that vision like, oh, there's no way we can get there. Well, let's figure out what the first thing we can do. And once you get that, the low hanging fruit and you win that, then the next one comes easier. And soon that resistance gets to be lower.
So it comes back to the how do you eat an elephant analogy, or the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step, or the first step.
100%. Yeah. And circling back to picking up on what you're hearing and just applying what you're hearing back to the formula. If it is, like, oh, it's always been that way, then hey, we got to do our work around that dissatisfaction. Or it's like, I don't even know what to do. I don't even know what are we shooting for here? Then you need to build out that vision more. And if you don't know where to begin, then it's like, okay, our plan isn't being communicated well enough. And at any one of those things, again, have a zero. That's why I love math, because it makes sense, right? It's logical. But we're not going to overcome the resistance.
Yeah. Okay. So if folks are on board and they agree that, hey, this current situation has got to change, or that change is being forced upon you, then you go to, all right, we've got to change. Now, what do we want our change to be? What is that vision that we want to create? We want to strive for, bring in the hope, the possibility, the creative thinking. Awesome. Got this big, grand idea. Now let's break it down to how are we going to get there? What is that very first step? And that formula, that magic is what's going to help get your coalition members on board, or your community members on board with supporting the change or the pivot or the new program or initiative.
And what I like about it too, it's a multiplier. It's multiplication between those three elements. And the more that you overcome the dissatisfaction or present that, the bigger the vision, the more buy-in to that vision. Every one of these gets bigger and stronger. And the more that you can create that plan collectively, it just becomes a driving force. It no longer is about you as the coalition director or the chair of the organization. It now has become an own organism that moves that resistance.
How do you see the accountability ladder paralleling, supporting, aligning in any way with the change formula?
Sure. So the accountability ladder you speak of is from our friend, of course,
Bruce
I can't
Gordon.
think of his name. Help me out. Yes, Bruce Gordon. Thank you. So Bruce Gordon with the NCAAP back a few years back in the 90s created the accountability ladder, which if you think about the accountability ladder, and that is where you are saying it's somebody else's problem, you're playing the victim mentality. That's where your dissatisfaction with the status quo is. It's that way. It's not mine. I don't have any business in it. I don't even know what I could do with this. So victim mentality really lies in that first part, the D, because they're just like, nothing I can do about it. But as you move up into that can-do attitude, that's where you're starting to create that vision and understand those first steps. So it's real easy to say, turn it back to folks and saying, where are you living here? To help them figure out what part are they holding things back or, anchoring the progress. And that's how I like to use the accountability ladder is just, let's have a self-check here. Are you being one that's flying the kite? Are you the one that's holding it back from going? And oftentimes it's that first thing, realizing that, yeah, I am saying that it's going to always be this way. It's somebody else's fault. There's nothing I can do about it. So raising that up and then moving on to that can do.
Using the accountability ladder as the go-between from dissatisfaction to vision, unlocking folks to be very solutions focused and let's figure this out.
It's such an powerless place, right? That being like the dissatisfaction, the status quo, if that's zero, that means that there's nothing we can do. It's always been that way. Well, yeah, there's something we can do. And if we're going to take it out of the prevention world and into the umbrella of what we're going through right now, I think about the funding and all those kind of things. We feel very helpless. It's being done to us. That's very much of a victim mentality, right? But maybe there was changes that needed to happen. Maybe we weren't using funds at the best way that we could possibly do. Maybe there was too many disfranchised funding sources that we needed to come together. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But accepting that maybe something needed to change is the first place that we need to go. So now that we're going to change something, what can we do? What could be the new tomorrow? What's our new tomorrow? What does the next generation of prevention look like? How does that kind of play out?
So we've got a coalition leader listening. They're going to grab the change formula, that free handout that you've got. They're going to go back and they want to start using it. What would be their first step?
I think really being truthful about the dissatisfaction that people are, if they're on board with that dissatisfaction. If it's not, it's our job to stir the kettle. It's like I always say that we're the convener of folks, and that we have a kettle of different fragrant vegetables, and think of a beef stew. And if we don't take our spoon and stir that kettle, it's gonna all get kind of stale at the bottom, and it's just gonna be what it is. But our job is really to, start stirring it up and seeing those flavors and making sure we don't just sit on the bottom, and make sure we take control and create something what's next. And so I think a lot of our work stays in that area. A lot of times we'll align this with the Colorado Triethnic Survey. And time and again, the readiness will be of a community that is at, denial or vague awareness. There's a scale of 1 to 9. And all the years that I've seen that scale being applied in communities, I've never seen it get past that vague awareness. And that's where that, identifying the status quo, it's like, yeah, there is an issue here. If we can get people at least to the vague awareness, then we're moved past 0 and we're at a 1.
I mean, a lot of what we do in prevention is education and awareness. So if we lean into our strengths, focusing or leveraging the change formula.
And I think that's where our coalitions then come together. And like you and I have worked with, we got so many tools on our toolbox, but I think about the collaboration multiplier then too, when you go into that and like, what do we all bring to the table? And when you start seeing the pieces come together, you can start seeing a different way of being. What would it be like if we had a business partner at the table that was totally invested in what we're doing? What if they could tap into some foundation that is outside of the grant world? What if? Start asking those what ifs around that table, and kind of take an inventory of what's all there for what's next kind of thing. And I think that's where our power in prevention comes from, because, someone says prevention is better together. And if we can create and facilitate those opportunities for people to see what we all bring to the table for what's around the corner.
What about, and I know there's many of y'all listening right now where the dissatisfaction or the change is being forced and it's all coming external. If I'm a coalition leader, I'm leading a regional prevention team, and I feel like things are good. We're hitting our stride. We got our relationships, our programming, capacity. Like we're good, and out of left field comes this forced change. What do I do?
Yeah. So all of a sudden you're faced with getting the rug pulled out from underneath you, right? And like anything, if you lost everything tomorrow, where do you start? You have to accept it, right? The first part of any journey is accepting that something has happened and not denying that it's happening. And the sooner that we can start realizing that, hey, I can't put all my eggs in this one basket, and start figuring out new creative ways. Because you can complain all you want about what's happening. You can be really sad about it, and I am too. But, okay, this is a hand that we've been dealt. And I think about, you've heard me say this, my analogy of the closet. So I'm one that have a high desire to make my closet clean, but it never seems to happen. Well, I read a lot of books, and I hear a lot of people say the best strategy for cleaning out your closet is to throw everything on your bed, empty the closet. And to me, I think that's kind of what's happened with our funding streams. They've cleaned out the closet. I'm not really happy about that, because I can't get into my bed until I get it cleaned up again, right? But not everything's going to need to go back in the closet. There's going to be some things that maybe need to be rearranged. But in the end of the day, we have to wear clothes. So there's going to be some things put back in the into the closet, because that's going to be there. We're always going to need prevention. It's going to look different. It's going to be organized different. And once we can accept that, I think that's where our dissatisfaction with what's happening to us, again, the victim mentality from the accountability ladder, changes to, okay, well, this is what we're dealt with. What can we do now?
That was kind of where my mind was starting to go, is the accountability ladder. Go back and reference that and see kind of where you're at, and then use that as your guide. And as you look at the download from Angie's website on the accountability ladder, folks, like you don't have to go from the bottom to the top. Just what would it take to move up one rung on that ladder?
Or you could knowing where you're at, right? Just acknowledging, okay, I'm reading out of this rung right now.
It also reminds me of, I don't know which bookshelf it's on, but the book Who Moved My Cheese by Spencer Johnson. And it's just a mindset shift in the rundown of that story. I know you've read it, but for our listeners, it's about mice in a maze, and they get conditioned to going to the same location every single day for their piece of cheese. And next thing you know, the cheese gets moved. One of the mice doesn't fare so well. The other one just starts exploring the maze to go find the cheese. It's just a sort of help shift your mindset paradigm around change.
That really makes me think about resilience, and you've done a lot of work with resilience too. In what ways do you see that playing into this as well?
Yes, so I've been talking more and more about resilience from my own personal resilience journey, resilience story, but I've also been looking and reflecting a lot on the concept of like a resilient organization and their ability to navigate, to weather storms. And shout out Jen Schneeman, my resilience and nervous system coach. The way she describes resilience is like a professional surfer, in that the waves of adversity will keep coming in. Sometimes they'll be big, giant waves. Sometimes they'll just be soft, subtle waves. Sometimes they'll come fast. Sometimes they'll come slow. But the goal is to build your skills, your toolbox, to be able to ride those waves as they come in like a professional surfer. And so we as individuals can practice, hone, learn our skill sets to improve our resilience, but then also organizations can absolutely do the same too. And pointing back to the change formula, to building the systems, the infrastructure, the capacity, the people, all to be able to navigate those waves of change as they come in. Absolutely.
That makes me think of two things. One, back when I was dealing with a lot of grief, I had a pastor that talked about how grief is like the waves. And I think what we're experiencing right now is a grief of how it has been. And back to Beckard's quote that you mentioned, that pain is staying the same is going to be greater than change. That's when you're ready to step forward. And so you may get hit with that wave at one time, and you got to ride that surfboard and balance until you get to smoother waters. And then that is where you're going to see the next journey unfolding. And the other thing that comes to mind for me is the activity that we've done with the wave. So even looking at trends, right? There's things that are on the horizon that we haven't even started to think about. And that's kind of going into that vision area. But there's things that are on that undertow that we just need to let go of and to keep our balance. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to navigating change, being a resilient individual, a resilient coalition, a resilient organization, I think when we approach it with that mindset, just like the change formula gives us that compass to measure, and then that can focus our efforts well. So as listeners, as you're thinking about, is your organization, whatever organization that may be, resilient? If not, why do you feel like it isn't? What are those things that, say maybe we aren't so resilient? Or what are those things that make you very resilient? And then based upon what you decide, what you uncover there, all right, get to work growing, strengthening, building what you need to. Yeah.
One of the quotes I have here from Amy Edmondson, I believe. Yes, Fearless Organization, right here. It says psychological safety, another element that we haven't talked about, but is important when we talk about the accountability ladder in particular. Psychological safety takes off the brakes that keep people from achieving what's possible. And I think in this time, if we're laying blame and we're not allowing people to be creative in that, not fostering psychological safety for our groups or organizations, we're going to be knocked off our I'm envisioning the surfboard, right? And it's going to take us under. So we need to create that environment where we have a buoy that says, if you fall off, that's okay. We're going to get you back on board. And that's kind of what I think when I think about resilience, is you're going to get knocked off your board, your surfboard, right? And as an organization, we need to take that risk, but we need to be able to have that life preserver there for lift each other up and pull them to shore when we need to.
Even, I'm glad you brought up psychological safety, even just at the individual level, what we, and I know many others are feeling in this time of uncertainty and forced change is very emotional. A whole lot of different emotions for folks are, and I think we as prevention leaders need to be very aware of that and make sure that we are cultivating those psychologically safe environments for our team members and for ourselves, and to honor the fact that, and it's okay to show up that I'm a little overextended today. Oh, I'm not bringing my A game today. Or in one of our past calls that we were on with somebody, they said, this last month has just felt really heavy. And, we as prevention leaders, we're in change, whether we wanted to be or not. We do absolutely need to hold psychological safety at the forefront, because those are our people. And if we're going to weather this storm, we're going to ride those waves, we absolutely need to take care of our people to be able to do that. Yeah.
And I think the most important thing that I've learned about psychological safety is you need to model the vulnerability yourself. How can you show up that I'm not okay today? And reach out to someone and say that, because it's going to you need to show that. Amy Edmondson also talks a lot about that in the Fearless Organization, that you need to lead from a place of vulnerability and be open to that. And I know another fan favorite of ours, Brene Brown, talks about living in that space as well.
That, and even just the power of, I see you, I hear you. Oh, you got a lot on your plate. I see that, and just acknowledging teammates and the stress that they're under, just so they feel and they know that they're heard, seen, and respected, which is another favorite liberating structure, but also very powerful and important. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Also, along the lines of psychological safety, some of the work that we've done together, bringing Lumina Spark and talking teams and psychological safety and resilience. One of the great conversations that just by design bubbles up during our workshops is the idea that personality theory, and how what makes me as a very people-focused, empathy person feel psychologically safe might be different than somebody that is very outcome-focused. And as a prevention leader, having that awareness and then knowing that, like, it's not a one-size-fits-all answer for psychological safety.
Right. Yeah. And I think knowing what it takes for you to be in a space, I love our A game, B game, that you oftentimes facilitate. Just because as simple as that, what do you need to bring your A game? And what's going to shut you down with your B game? And that's one way to build psychological safety, just saying, hey, I'm not going to be my best self if this happens. Or if I have, I'm not my best self, I have to be around people all the time. Or when a tidal wave of new information hits me, I may need to take a moment and just let myself process that. That's not me. I'm going to go and say, let's go have brainstorm session, because that's how I'm able to deal with this. Some of us need to talk out loud, some of us need to retreat. But being very apparent and very aware what is needed by yourself and what's needed by the folks that you work with, and just being open to that. And that, admitting to what's your B game is where you bring that vulnerability and cultivate that psychological safety, for the organization. And the more that you can practice that, the better that we're going to be able to ride this storm out.
I'm glad you mentioned processing, because that in my own growth, I'll call it my confidence, my braveness, my courage to, in the moment, to colleagues and professionals, to say, I need a minute to process, or let me process for a bit. Because earlier on, I would feel the pressure to, I gotta say something. They're gonna think I'm stupid, and they're like, face turns red. I get all flushed, but that wasn't my A game, because I needed time to process. And now that I've grown so much that I can say comfortably and confidently say, I need a little bit to process. That, but it's not easy. It can be scary. Like I said, courage, because it feels like it takes a little bit of courage to be able to say that, and as you're trying to grow in that area. So yeah, all the folks like me that are recovering people pleasers, it's okay to say, give me a few minutes to process. I know it ain't easy, but you can do it.
For all of us that are like hey, can we talk this out loud? I mean, I respect when I know that that's what people need. I will quiet myself. It's not that I'm not going to say my ideas, but I know when people need a space, need a moment, need a beat. Yeah.
Along that same lines, one of the things that I try to remind folks, and I have to remind myself too, when we're training, when we're speaking, we often have this idea of what an engaged audience looks like. We see somebody sitting back on their laptop, their tablet. You're like, they're checked out. They're not paying attention, or they're on their phone, or they're sitting there with their arms crossed. And I used to think, they're just checked out. Like, they don't care. I must be doing a terrible job, and go down this negative thinking spiral. And different people engage differently. Some folks, that's their best learning style, is to sit back and listen, or they need to fidget. So it doesn't necessarily mean they're not engaged. So if you're leading a meeting, if you're leading a training, create space in your mind. Be open to, just because they're not engaging the way that they should be engaging, doesn't mean they're not engaged and listening and tuned in. Yeah.
I joke, but I'm not really joking. I will give myself 10 seconds of biting my tongue, literally. I usually only get to about 7 before someone actually starts talking, because, when you have those blank spaces and you're an idea person, it's like, okay, I got to fill in the space. Well, you're not allowing that time for processing. And so figure out your trick, whatever it is, to make sure everyone has space. That's for sure.
Understanding and valuing differences in personality, giving them space for thinking and what it means to be engaged, and how that can also run right alongside the power of vulnerability. Those all create a good solid foundation for psychological safety. Psychological safety also then leads to the accountability ladder and moving from that victim mindset to solutions mindset. Let's find a solution. Let's problem solve this. To then the change formula, where if you've got dissatisfaction with the status quo, if you've got that vision of the future, that hope, if you've identified that clear first step, you'll then overcome that resistance to change. How's that for a fair summary of what we've talked about?
I believe that fits really well. Yeah.
Yeah. What have we not talked about that you'd like to share with our audience? Open slate, anything that we haven't chatted about that you want to dive into. Also, a pass is a fair game.
Oh boy. Well, the one thing we haven't brought up in this conversation, and it's foundational to everything, is the power of conversation in itself. And, whether it be whatever conversation method, I've kind of adapted the seed model because I believe as prevention folks, we're planting seeds and, giving opportunity for people to really voice what they see around in the world. And that's fundamentally, we'll take in the world a little bit different than everyone else, right? You see something different than I do just because we come from different paths. We have different storylines that have shaped us to who we are today and how we react to that. So as we explore what we're seeing, what does that mean for me? So really exploring the pros, the cons, what is the meaning behind this? And then leaving space for the group to say, wow, now that I've seen that, let's evaluate what we're working with here. Now we got everyone's perspectives and where they're coming from. Let's evaluate what we're really working with. And especially when we're talking about change, letting those 3 layers be there and really open up people's eyes to each other and sift out the things that we can work with is where you're going to lead to those first steps of change. So that's when we can start doing something. And that's the last letter of that seed formula. So I think it's important that we really dive into conversations that allow people's voices and perspectives, emotions to be surfaced now more than ever. And then really, sift out what we can work with. You can't tackle the whole world, but what can we do? And those little bite sizes, as you said, the elephant, right? What bite size can we take on today?
And I'll highlight, underline, asterisk, bold font. The art and skill of conversation should absolutely be the foundational, fundamental skill for anybody working in prevention. And honestly, for any working professional, if you have conversation with people, you need to learn how to facilitate conversations that mean something, that create space for all different personality styles, for all different thinking styles, so where folks feel psychologically safe and can share their wisdom with the group. So yeah, absolutely. And be sure to put a link to your website in the show notes so folks can, say, hey, Angie, I want to learn to facilitate better conversations. Can you help me? So they can get connected. Yeah, absolutely. And you're on most of the social channels, right? All the main ones? Yeah, okay. I'll drop the links in the show notes there too. And where can folks go grab some of these free resources and stuff that you got?
I believe I'll check on my website. It's been a hot minute, but under resources, I have most of them uploaded in there. So feel free to take a look, and I'm always down for a conversation about them. We just had this conversation where I need people to brainstorm with. A thought partner is always welcome to my world. So my cat doesn't always do it for me. So if you want to have a chat, hit me up. I'm more than willing to.
The slogan of Asa Facilitation, what is it? It starts with what? Connect, spark, and ignite. Yes, exactly. Yeah. It's not just a tagline. That's who you are. That's you.
Yeah.
That's you. So absolutely, listeners, get connected, social media, website, drop Angie an email, and grab a virtual coffee. And you never know where she'll actually be at in this world when she logs on to grab a virtual coffee with you. I guarantee it'll be a good story to go along with it.
Yes.
Thank you very much for spending some time chatting with me, talking about how to navigate, how to lead through change, because we're all getting hit with a whole lot of change right here and right now. So this is very, very timely, relevant, and practical and ethical. So keep on rocking, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Prevention Leaders Podcast with Dave Clausen. Since prevention is better together, make sure you click the subscribe button and share this and other episodes with a friend. If you have a topic idea or guest suggestion, follow us on social media or email us at info@preventionleaders.com.